Let's jump right into this explainer and talk about a situation that honestly, almost all of us have dealt with at some point. I mean, we're talking about that massive, frustrating gap between a doctor telling you your health is completely fine on paper and how you actually feel day to day. Actually feeling optimal. You totally know the drill, right? You go in, get your blood work done, and then you just wait nervously for that call. And then you hear those three words, everything looks normal. It's so definitive. You're supposed to feel relieved, but instead, a lot of us just feel dismissed. Mostly because absolutely nothing about our bodies actually feels normal. Because look, if everything is supposedly so fine, we really have to ask the obvious question here. Why do you feel so terrible? Why are you literally exhausted even after a full 8 hours of sleep? Why is your brain totally foggy by like 2 p.m. every day? Or why are you battling these unpredictable moods and stubborn weight that just won't budge no matter how flawlessly you think you're eating? Well, it all boils down to two completely different medical philosophies. Standard lab reference ranges, they're built for one thing: detecting disease. They're based on population averages. And let's be real for a second. The average population is exhausted and struggling metabolically. Normal usually just means you aren't quite sick enough to need medication yet. But our actual goal? That should be optimizing health. That means thriving, having high energy, and catching your body's little early warning signs way before a disease actually strikes. So let's dive right into 5 specific, often overlooked lab markers where this whole normal label totally fails us, especially if you happen to follow a plant-based diet. Okay, first step is ferritin, which is basically your body's iron storage. Now, what's wild here is that labs will routinely tell you a ferritin level of 15 to 30 is perfectly normal. But to actually thrive and not feel chronically fatigued, your true optimal target is really between 50 and 70. You could literally have totally normal hemoglobin, but be functionally iron deficient deep in your tissues. Crazy, right? And this perfectly illustrates what goes on in that silent, sneaky gap between 15 and 50. Ferritin is an absolute silent energy killer. Without enough iron tucked away in storage, your body just can't deliver oxygen properly. So you might get constant exhaustion, freezing cold hands and feet, noticeable hair shedding, or find yourself out of breath from just walking up the stairs. Plus, there's that awful wired but tired feeling, where you're dead on your feet all day, but suddenly at 2 a.m. your brain wants to solve world peace. And hey, quick plant-based alert here. This is incredibly common on plant-based diets if you aren't intentionally planning your iron intake. Next on the list is vitamin B12. The standard lab range says basically anything from 200 all the way up to 900 is normal. That range is just massively wide. In reality, neurological symptoms can start popping up way above that 200 mark. To actually be optimally protected, you really want to target that 400 to 500 range. Because think about it, if you are just in range, say you're hovering around 250, you aren't technically deficient on paper, but man, you might be dealing with a whole cluster of annoying symptoms. We're talking severe brain fog, memory blips, random tingling or numbness in your fingers and toes, low moods, and just this profound mental fatigue. And for our plant-based eaters out there, B12 is absolutely foundational. It's not a nice to have, it's literally critical for keeping your nerves and your brain healthy. All right, let's talk vitamin D. And keep in mind, vitamin D isn't even just a vitamin. It's a super powerful hormone that drives your immunity, your mood, and your inflammation levels. Now, a level of 30 is considered technically fine by most standard labs. But if you talk to the experts, the general consensus is that your optimal target should actually be sitting between 40 and 60. So what happens when you get stuck in that low normal trap, just hanging around a 30? Well, you might not feel actively sick, but you definitely won't feel your best. The risks here include a low mood, catching quite literally every single bug that goes around the office, struggling to recover after a basic workout, and dealing with lingering chronic inflammation. Honestly, if you work indoors, wear sunscreen consistently, which by the way, you absolutely should, or you avoid fortified foods, making sure you hit that optimal 40 to 60 range is completely essential. Moving right along to our fourth marker, A1C. This is your 3-month blood sugar average. Now, most people look at their labs and think, hey, as long as my A1C is below 5.7%, I'm not diabetic, so I'm totally good. But an A1C of 5.5 to 5.6%, that's a slow burn problem right there. It is a massive early red flag that insulin resistance is already brewing in the background. When you're sitting in that 5.5 to 5.6% window, you are very likely feeling the classic signs. Things like daily blood sugar spikes, those massive hit-a-brick-wall energy crashes in the afternoon. increased fat storage, and just a much higher long-term metabolic risk. And another major plant-based alert here. Just because a diet is plant-based doesn't magically mean your blood sugar is stable, especially if your meals lean heavily on refined grains, liquid sugars, and just don't have quite enough fiber. Okay, our fifth and final marker is triglycerides. Think of this as your metabolic clue for how your body handles excess energy, especially from carbs. The standard lab limit will tell you that anything under 150 is normal, but honestly, that is just way too high for truly optimal health. You really want your triglycerides under 100, and ideally, even under 80. Having high normal triglycerides, like say you're around 130 or 140, is one of the absolute earliest signs that your metabolism is starting to struggle. It usually points to excess sugar intake and poor metabolic flexibility. And how does that actually show up for you? Well, it looks like stubborn belly fat that just appears out of nowhere, severe afternoon crashes, and feeling constantly naggingly hungry. It's basically your body's way of telling you, hey, I'm really struggling to process the fuel you're giving me. So, we've covered a ton of ground here, and you might actually want to pause and grab a screenshot of this summary. It perfectly lays out those huge data gaps between merely surviving and genuinely thriving. From ferritin to B12, vitamin D, A1C, and triglycerides. It is literally the perfect visual for how normal keeps you in the dark, while optimal finally turns the lights on. Let's move into the mindset shift. It's time to talk about your labs versus your actual symptoms, and the real paradigm shift we need to make here. This quote really hits the nail on the head. Your labs are the report, but your symptoms are the story. And guess what? The story matters so much more. Your body is incredibly smart. It will always warn you that something is off, whether it's through fatigue, weird cravings, or brain fog, way before your labs actually catch up and flag an official disease. If you feel off, you aren't imagining it. You're just early. So how do we actually optimize right now? How do we stop blindly accepting normal? Let's get into the actionable steps. Okay, here is your game plan. 4 concrete steps. Step 1, ask for context. Don't just ask your doctor if you're normal, ask exactly where you fall in the optimal range. Step 2, look for patterns. A single blood test is just a snapshot, right? You need to track your trends over time, like is your B12 slowly dropping year over year. Step 3, match your labs to your symptoms. Connect that physical fatigue directly to your low normal ferritin or B12. And finally, step 4, adjust before a diagnosis. Make those crucial lifestyle and diet tweaks during this not optimal phase, because that is exactly when changing course is the easiest and the most powerful. I want you to always remember this contrast. Normal is just a statistical label, but feeling good, that is a real biological signal. Optimal health is not about just surviving inside some mathematical bell curve. It's about having really stable energy, clear thinking, a strong metabolism, and just actually feeling like yourself again. Which brings us to our final question for this explainer. Are you ready to trust the signal? Look, if your labs say you're fine, but your body is practically screaming that it's struggling, please don't wait to feel worse just to qualify for medical help. Take a hard look at your last blood panel. What story is it actually telling you? Trust your body's signal, demand optimal, and start optimizing your health today.